The city buzzed with life, but none of it belonged to Ella. She sat beneath an overpass on the east side of Manhattan, her frail frame wrapped in a tattered blanket. The cold winter air nipped at her skin, making her shiver uncontrollably. Above her, the rumble of traffic reminded her of how life carried on, indifferent to her struggles. 2 years ago, Ella had a home, a small, cozy apartment where laughter filled the air. But that was before the fire. It had stolen her parents, her stability, and her future in one cruel night. The foster system had been her next stop, but it wasn't long before she slipped through the cracks, abandoned to the streets at just 18. Now at 20, her life was a relentless battle. Every bite of food was a victory, every night she survived was a triumph. But as much as she tried, loneliness weighed heavier than hunger. It was on one of those desolate nights. Ella had found half a stale sandwich in a dumpster behind a diner. It wasn't much, but it would keep her alive another day. She unwrapped the sandwich carefully, her hands trembling from both the cold and exhaustion. That's when she saw the cat. It was a scrawny thing, black with patches of white on its face and paws. Its green eyes glowed in the dim light of the alley, watching her with caution but also unmistakable hunger. "Hey little guy," Ella whispered, her voice hoarse from disuse. The cat flinched but didn't run. For a moment she hesitated. This was the first meal she'd had all day. Sharing it would mean less for her. But as she looked into the cat's eyes, something inside her softened. "You look worse off than me," she said, breaking off a piece of the sandwich and tossing it toward the cat. The cat sniffed the bread cautiously before devouring it. Slowly it crept closer, its tail twitching nervously. Ella chuckled, a sound she hadn't heard from herself in years. "Guess we're both desperate, huh?" By the time the sandwich was gone, the cat was curled up beside her, purring softly. Ella reached out tentatively, stroking its thin fur. "You need a name," she murmured. "How about Shadow? You're quiet and sneaky just like one." Over the next few weeks, Shadow became Ella's constant companion. He followed her everywhere, darting between her legs and curling up on her lap whenever she sat. In return, Ella shared whatever scraps she found, even if it meant going hungry herself. On cold nights, Shadow would press against her chest, his tiny body radiating a warmth that was both physical and emotional. For the first time in years, Ella didn't feel completely alone. One day while sitting in the park, Ella pulled out a piece of cardboard and a nub of charcoal she'd found. She began sketching Shadow, his sleek form and piercing green eyes captured in quick, delicate strokes. A passerby stopped, intrigued. "That's beautiful," the woman said, pulling out a $5 bill. "Would you sell it?" Ella blinked, startled. Sure." The woman handed her the money and walked away with the sketch. Ella stared at the bill in disbelief. For the first time, hope flickered in her chest. One evening as they searched for food, Shadow began acting strangely. He darted ahead, his tail flicking with purpose. "Shadow? What is it?" Ella called, struggling to keep up. The cat led her to an alley, where something shiny glinted beneath a pile of trash. Ella knelt and pulled it out, a gold bracelet, intricate and heavy. Her heart raced. This could be her way out. She could pawn it and have enough money to eat, maybe even rent a cheap motel room for a few nights. But as she turned the bracelet over in her hands, guilt crept in. "It's not mine," she murmured, looking at Shadow. The cat tilted his head as if urging her to decide. The next morning she took the bracelet to a small jewelry store, hoping to find its owner. The jeweler examined it and nodded. "This belongs to a woman who lives nearby. I'll call her." Within an hour, Ella was face to face with the owner, a wealthy woman in her 40s. The woman looked at Ella's tattered clothes and Shadow perched on her shoulder. "Why didn't you sell it?" the woman asked, her tone skeptical. Ella swallowed hard. "Because it's yours." The woman's expression softened. "Wait here." She returned with a $100 bill and handed it to Ella. "For your honesty." Ella's breath caught. "Thank you," she whispered, clutching the money like a lifeline. That night, Ella bought Shadow a proper meal, a can of cat food and a small bag of treats. They feasted together, laughing, Ella for the first time in years. But their happiness was short-lived. A week later, Shadow fell ill. Ella used the last of her money to take him to a vet, who delivered the devastating news. Shadow had a terminal illness. Ella was crushed. Shadow had been her savior, her only friend. Now she was losing him. Determined to make his last days special, Ella spent every moment with him, sketching his likeness on every scrap of paper she could find. Each drawing was a love letter to the little creature who had saved her life. Months later, Ella stood in a small gallery, her sketches of Shadow displayed on the walls. A local artist had discovered her work and offered her a chance to showcase it. As visitors admired her art, Ella held Shadow in her arms, his frail body wrapped in a soft blanket. Tears streamed down her face as she whispered, "You gave me a reason to keep going." "Thank you." Shadow purred weakly, his eyes closing for the last time. Ella stood there, surrounded by the art they had created together, knowing that while she had lost her companion, she had gained something far greater, a purpose and a spark of hope for the future.